Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's Toast to the Art Show with Nancy and Lisa. You know, every third Saturday we get to chat with one of our favorite people, Victoria Chick. She is a contemporary figurative artist and early 19th and 20th century print collector. She's based in Silver City, New Mexico, where she's also spearheaded the creation, which is in development now, of the Southwest Regional Museum of Art and Art Center. It's very cool. I encourage you to go to her website, victoriachick.com. So welcome back, Victoria. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Lisa. Glad to be here.
We're always excited, and we're excited about this topic, the starving artist. Okay. So everybody, by the way, the latest issue of, or the brand new magazine, Way Back When, History Magazine, is out, and that's the front cover story, is Victoria's article about how the 17th century Dutch shipping industry spurred art, like how art happened. And now we're talking about the starving artist. Like, that's a bit of an opposite thing, but kind of not. If you hear and read her article now about the starving artist, it goes into what happened in France and the British blockade and the French Revolution, all of this history. Why did artists have to starve at a point? So we're going to talk about that today. And I find it fascinating because we always talk about the starving artist. You think of even musicians. There was the band Aha. I think it was Aha, or was it U2? I don't know which one, but I remember it was one of the two that they said, oh, they heated themselves with a light bulb, in their tiny little dingy apartment, didn't have food, really lived off of canned beans, things like that. We hear about this, but this was a real deal, and it starts way back when. So welcome back, Victoria. Let's talk about the starving artist, which we talked about on this show before, and now you went down the big rabbit hole.
Well,
at least it wasn't a YouTube one, right? Not the YouTube rabbit hole, because that means like we'll never see you again.
Oh,
so
no.
I'm glad. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, a rabbit trail maybe is a better word than a rabbit hole, because I went off on a lot of directions to study this idea of the starving artist. We tossed the term around kind of in a humorous way. And when you and I were talking, we decided let's find out how it came about. So that was what I set myself to do since we met last time. And it's been very interesting. It's been a real education for me in a way, because I never really studied economics that much. And I discovered that economics is the biggest reason why we came up with the term starving artist. It wasn't just artists that were starving. It was almost everybody in France for a period of time was in a starving situation.
When I was a teenager and I was being told to pick what I'm going to do for my, how I'm going to support myself through life, and I wanted to be an artist. And my parents were, you're going to starve. That's it. that was it. You're starve. You're going to starve. I was like, well, so the starving artist thing really, I took that to heart, and I thought, okay, I'm still going to be an artist. But then I was reading about artists that were making a lot of money, and so I was thinking, well, okay. But as I read about different artists, they compromised to a degree so they could live, but still do art, which is exactly what I did for a while. I ended up doing pet portraits. Did I want to do only pet portraits? No. Do I like doing them? Yeah, because I like dogs and cats and horses, and so it doesn't bother me to do it. But it seemed more like photography to me than painting. So and people just wanted their animal to look straight at them. They want like scenery or the animal to be doing something. They just wanted the dog or the cat to look at them. And I found that a little frustrating. So artistically,
Yes.
yeah, I want the
Oh,
dog.
I hear Victoria.
Yeah, I want the dog to run in a field or chase a rabbit.
Yeah.
No, we're back on the rabbit.
They wanted to
Yeah,
kill.
down the rabbit hole. But
Well, your parents were right, and and you're right. You're both right. It is very difficult because most artists aren't working for someone anymore. I mean, if you go back in this pretty far, but you go back even 800 years, you're working for a patron. You're like one of the crew, one of his workers, and so he's paying you a certain amount just to stick around and paint stuff that he likes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then there were corporations at the time. There were governments. There were churches. So there were places for artists to work. However, that time there weren't that many artists either. So because everybody was more involved in still in survival, and and so if they had an artistic bent, a design bent, they could probably find something that was useful that would sublimate their drive to create. You know, they could be a blacksmith, or they could plow in different fields in a creative way. You know, there are all kinds of things that people figured out to do. Or sewing was another thing. So the economy, I mean, as long as people have existed, the economy has not given artists a lot to do, honestly, until recently. Until when I say recently, I mean like the last couple hundred years, because there just weren't there wasn't that much work available to allow people to make a living,
right?
People to buy their work, and so that's really kind of a fairly recent thing. We look at our history books and there's see all these fabulous things, but when you really look at how many artists there were in those art history books, there's not that many, considering all the billions of people that existed.
Right. And then they worked for like the king or queen.
Yes.
And they lived in the palace and painted what they were told to paint. Which
they got wine. You know, they got wine, right?
Well, probably, but
and you know, this was the same thing with musicians at the time. If you were really good, or if you could write music really well, or if you could play music really well, you were employed. You had full-time employment. But people who loved music, they couldn't afford an instrument. They would figure out some other way to satisfy their itch to make music. So I think when I studied this, I kind of had to limit everything because it was just such a huge topic. So I started with the French Revolution as being my starting point. And the French Revolution, while it was probably well intended to make people's lives better, did not make lives better in France at all for a long time. Let's see. First of all, they were killing off their patrons, so they were executing nobility by the dozens, and the people that would have enough money to buy artwork or to commission artwork, they were down on the church. They got rid of a lot of church prelates, so they cut off that avenue for employment or selling. So in addition to that, you think all the people that were executed or left town if they could, or left the country if they could, all the people that worked for them now were suddenly jobless. So it was a great hardship. and all the industries that would supply all those people with luxury items, they now had no work. And it lasted for quite a long time, even after the revolution. Well, actually, there were 5 revolutions, but until Napoleon came along. When Napoleon came along, he sort of stabilized things. He was a very strong and very a good leader. History doesn't treat him particularly well. They sort of think of him as kind of narcissistic, which he probably was. But he was able to get things calmed down economically. We talked about some other things that came up during this period of time, and that was some of the agricultural economy that France based itself on. France still is 45% of an agricultural economy. So it was the one thing was the wine blight. The vines were
That's
gone.
not cool.
No, I knew that would,
That's
you hone in on that.
yeah, but listen, but that was just not. It was bad for agriculture, but also artists need wine, don't you, Victoria? I know as a musician, I know a lot of musicians who say no drinking, but we want our wine.
Well, so and they had a silkworm problem. They had some kind of parasite that was attacking silkworms. A lot of people don't realize that France had this huge silk industry making silk fabric up in the northern part of France. So that went south about the same time the wine thing did, and so the employment rate, the ability to earn a living for your family was really bad. One thing that happened during Napoleon's time was that there was a national distribution of wealth. I'll say wealth, and that didn't mean that it was really wealthy, but everybody got some money from the government, and they took money away from people that earned more, and they gave it to people that didn't earn anything. So they were trying to even it out. We kind of have that idea sometimes that people talk about today. It's a very communistic idea that Lenin came up with. I think he may have gotten his idea from the French Revolution. So it did keep people from starving, but nobody was well off. And so
it doesn't really work because people, especially for artists, you want to be able to do what you want and name the price you want, and you don't, that
it doesn't work.
That meant well, I think, though. I think he did. I don't know. No, because no, yes, no, yes, no. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, because then you're still controlling and whatever, This is such a weird thing but this is the thing that's always fascinating, that you always bring to the table. The history of the world is part of art. It is, I think there's parts of the history of the world doesn't exist without art, telling it and showcasing it. And so here's artists starving in the midst of all this economic crisis. We've seen this now. I mean, musicians to this day, I think visual artists have a better shot. Well, not photographers. When cell phones came out and everyone could, get cameras, everybody thinks they're a photographer digitally. Here we go. And then musicians now, everything is streaming. So here's your penny every million downloads kind of thing. So this is kind of happening now, but it happened back in the day too. The arts are what nurture our society when stuff hits the fan, when we have wars, when we have a depression, not just a recession, like you're saying, a recession to a depression is what happened to France, and from the revolution and all these agricultural and silk sheets. My God, wine and silk going at the same time. Listen, that's not cool. But that stuff going away, you've got to think, how do the artists, like, that's what they know, that's who they are. And I actually really need to make that point, because we think of, oh, we'll just go get a job doing this or whatever, but artists are artists, musicians are musicians, and now musicians, majority that we interview all levels of where they are financially, and some go, hey, you know what, I'm going to be an investor and have that day job, but at night I'm doing the musician thing, and that's
Right.
how they're going to do it because of family. So they're in that split thing, which isn't, they want to be a full-time musician. It's a very
I
difficult
know,
road,
but
and I think,
then you
but
don't get to do exactly what you want to do artistically or musically.
this
if
is where
you-
that's where
Yeah.
the starving artist part of the, I
Right.
know, but what we look at today, because it's weird, because it seems like the big rich people helped the arts, but at the same time they screw the artist in a way, like
Right.
today, like in a way, you know what I mean? So I'm sorry, but a nickel for your million downloads or a penny or whatever it is just not good enough. So it's kind of a very weird thing to look at this about how economics and history of war
But
and agricultural disease, with the wine blight and things like that. Victoria, this is a big rabbit hole. This big one.
It is. And when this was going on, initially, when the French Revolution started, there was a lot of envy, and as you say, people seeing the rich having so much more than they had. However, by the time the end of the 19th century was coming around, there was less of that because a lot of people were more or less in the same boat. From an economic standpoint. However, there was still, I would say, a degree of protectionism among the artists. Take a look. This is when we start getting into the time period that gets identified with starving artist, and that is about the 1870s, 80s, 90s, when the Industrial Revolution started. France was very late on that, but they did get railroads. Their manufacturing was not great. They did start working with chemicals and making, for instance, one of the things they made out of chemicals was some forms of paint. But anyway, you remember when the French Impressionists were working, and they were working in a way that was different from the styles of painting of previous decades, like the neoclassical period or the Romantic period, for instance. Those were styles of painting that were looked up to. The French, there was an organization called let's wait a second. My mind just went.
Oh, you have to go and do like a French organization. Remember,
And well, you had the Salon de Refusés. So those were because those artists were not allowed to show their work in the French Academy, and they weren't allowed to do that because their work was not in the style that's approved. So,
well, excuse us.
yeah. So this was, but this was
Sorry.
this was not an economic. They didn't let them. They refused to let them show, not because they were poor, but because they didn't like their work. It just flew in the face of everything it thought was beautiful and lofty and so forth. So that was the first time when there was a real disconnect in the art community.
Wow. So this was a poo-poo on, so basically, like, we could look at this as, rock and roll came out and everybody thought the devil was singing,
So the Salon de Refusés was a good thing because it got the people who truly, they probably were kind of starving at that point. They weren't identified that way, but that was probably in reality that they did not really get enough to eat or anything else. But they grouped together, and so we we see them as taking control of their lives in a way. They can't show anywhere else. So my gosh, they're going to form their own association. They're going to form their own ability to exhibit. And although we see these people as masters today, at the time they were painting, they were not getting any positive recognition. Certainly not any money for quite a lot, for years.
Mm.
They just hung out, and of course they drank a lot.
Get over the
apparently-
blight, everybody. No wine blight for
apparently-
that.
Apparently the wine disaster recovered by that time.
Yes, apparently.
So, but artists, as you know, because you're a musician, artists, musicians, people who are creative, writers, for example, I say even athletes, they're not necessarily creative, but they are on the fringe also, because they have a talent that often is not recorded. You have to be at a very high level before you're going to make it your life's ability to make a living or better.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
You have to kind of just go out on that limb. It's like,
Yeah.
how far are you going to go? And it's like, and then the marketing comes in nowadays, right? Marketing.
Well, and
You know?
you have to learn to be a business person. If you're going to make
In
money
this-
as an artist, you now
in
have
this-
to be a business person.
in this day and age, we can work in something, and if we are driven to do art, we will do it.
That's exactly it. I think
Um,
even you've got to think back in the days for the artists that truly were starving artists because they were starving because
there
of the
was
way
no
it
other-
was. They
yeah.
still did it though. They still did it. And you've got to think about that. Like,
yeah.
maybe they swept
Well,
streets or did
the
something,
thing is, Lisa, the ones that we know about did it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were probably hundreds of people out there who
That didn't.
were what today we would call hobbyists. And they doesn't mean that they weren't pretty good or even very good or even excellent, but they didn't have the market at that time to do art full time.
Right.
Mm,
So,
exactly.
The difference
we know
between,
about the ones that made it.
right. The difference between painting or sculpting what you want is different than what the public will buy sometimes.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
look at Ted DeGrazia, right? Look at him. He didn't really take commissions, but he became a reproduction artist and became one of the biggest in the world of most reproduced.
But I
what?
think after he died.
He was a salesman, and he knew he was
Unfortunately.
one of the best. He was he was an incredible salesman. Went out, and then he got people to reproduce his art for him. So it was still art. It wasn't like a photocopy or whatever.
Or
But he had
print.
people like work with.
He had actual
prints made,
people printing,
but printing
actually
and
painting the same
and
thing.
copying his design work and his art, textiles and things. I mean, he saw like, you know what, I can make a business out of this.
Mhm.
And he was a smart dude. I mean, he really was. But he still got to do his art, and he still lived his life as.
Yeah.
Paul McCartney went to his gallery, and it was 4:00 or 5:00 that he closed the gallery, and he closed his gallery on Paul McCartney. Just closed it.
Dude. And
That's
Paul
the time.
McCartney, it's like,
That's
no,
it.
I'm Paul McCartney. Open up, and he's
well,
like,
I
don't
think if
care.
he knew it was him, he may have. But it was like, it's my Chivas Regal time. Leave me alone. That's it. He had his limits of, I need my artist time, and he would paint until 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning.
Mhm.
And so when you think about like the artist, yet he also knew he had to do both sides to make it work.
Right. He had to have the business side too. You can't do it unless you have somebody you can trust to do the business side. And that's,
Yeah. So, but it's a bit different now. So but
Well,
it's still, it's just like why can't artists just be able to be free and be paid? just doesn't work that
Well,
way. It is a
there
business.
used to
So this is
be-
the evolution of the
Well,
arts become a
Wait a
business,
second.
right? Sorry, go
Wait a
ahead.
second.
Sorry.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. No, be free and be paid. There's something there that is wrong.
I know. It
Whoever-
doesn't.
Whoever is paying you is calling the shots.
Exactly.
It's
Like
good
in any other job.
easy to say we should all be subsidized.
No,
But-
that doesn't.
but
No,
you see,
it doesn't work
remember-
that way.
Remember when the communists took over Russia, the intelligentsia and the artists were thrilled, but their artwork wound up being not accepted. I mean, the Russian government did not like that artwork. They liked the kind of artwork that Russians did later, which was more like propaganda, showing the happy
Right.
peasants and the noble mother, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, if somebody's going to commission you, and even if they say sort of that you're free, where your money's coming from, and you want to keep them happy. So
Exactly.
I don't know that. I don't think that's really freeing.
No, it's not. However, we've talked about public art, right?
Yeah.
And so when a public artist, like, here's the idea, let the artist do their thing. It's like the National Parks Arts Foundation, right? They let people go in, do their art, and they apply. I'm going to be an artist for a month. They are an artist, but I'm going to be a resident, for a month in a national park. Here's my vision. As soon as they get into that park, I swear to God, we've been doing interviews every month for years with them. These artists change their mind, even if they've done it before in the same park. Everything changes when they get
Well,
there.
Of course.
And the foundation knows that, and they go, okay, well, go ahead. That's the whole process is going to change because that's what creativity is. So they're not stuck to it, which is one of those few art things that people aren't, that allow them to truly be free, But
Right.
when it comes to, commissions, you need those commissions. You need to survive as an artist. But like public art, I think that's a weird, we've talked about this on shows because, we're doing our public art across America, right? On our Love Your Park store. But that's an interesting thing too. But most of the time, the artist, if they have a vision for a mural, they go, hey, I'm painting something about Chicago or something, right? In Chicago, I'm going to do this. And then everybody has to go through all the muckety muck stuff, which means city councils.
Right.
Dude, by the time the artist gets paid, is it even worth it? You know what I mean? Of course it is when the art is there, but it's
I can think of two examples. One was when Rodin was working. He was commissioned by a city government.
It's his birthday today that we're recording, by the way. Just saying.
Oh,
It's his birthday today. Yes.
This is appropriate. So he did this sculpture, and they hated it. They hated it, and they hid it. They hid it for a while. They didn't know what to do with it. Anyway, because it didn't think, for some reason, they didn't think it was noble enough. But that's one example of, because it was a committee. It was a town council that had commissioned this. They hated it. So the other thing is, I think it was Chicago. There was a sculpture made by a contemporary sculptor. I think it was Richard Serra. Anyway, he likes large steel slabs, and so he made this steel slab and was placed in a concrete area that people used to use to go to lunch. They would cross this concrete area to go to lunch. Now this thing was in their way, and boy, they fussed that public funds were being used for this. We're really getting off on a tangent here.
I know, it's
How can you
funny.
talk about the starving artist without? Sorry.
But Richard Serra wasn't starving, but that's okay.
But that I want to tell everybody, if you go to nationalparktraveling.com or Blend Radio and TV, I'll go look it up now. You talk about that in your article about public art. That was one of those examples about it that people should recognize, that it is an interesting thing about. I'm going there now, so everybody stay tuned. There's a public art story on blendradioandtv.com, and it does link over. I believe it's going there. I'm getting there. But anyway, you do talk about that, and it is on the nationalparktraveling.com site. But you talk about that sculpture, and people had art is supposed to make you change your ways, or not necessarily change your ways, but make you see something. We're supposed to go a different route once in a while, right? So you see something different, and that's what art's about. Look at something differently, right? That's why we go down on these tangents. There's every time you come on a show, we go to a rabbit hole, and this is one of the biggest ones. So just saying.
If you've got a 30-minute lunch hour, you have to make a detour. You're really pissed.
but still, I'm still trying to find
the thing with art. The thing with art is, as an artist, you're creating what you have in your mind, your heart, your soul, to the best of your ability. Right. And you put it out in front of the public, and the public is very critical or complimentary, whichever. You get a smattering of both. Like somebody will walk, oh my God, that's so beautiful. And the next person's like, that's dog shit.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, did you say that on air, Nancy?
Well, yeah. But that's exactly what they do. And so it's up, down, up, down, up, down. And so it's emotional because it's your creation.
But I want to go to what Victoria was talking about, the artist it was called the Tilted Arc.
Yes.
And it was a contemporary abstract steel sculpture that was designed in the 1980s by Richard Serra. And that is the article, and that is on nationalparktraveling.com. So it then people thought it was a shelter for rapists and muggers. This is from your article, by the way.
Yeah, that was one of the complaints.
Yes, and a whole letter writing campaign ensued, and then they decided to move the sculpture. And he claimed that to move it was to destroy it because it was site specific.
Yes.
See,
dude, and they cut it into 3 sections.
Well, that's ouch. That's ouch.
He said art is not democratic. It is not for the people. That's what his comment was. That's awesome. And at the same time, today that we're recording this show, it is Rodin's birthday. We're recording this November 12th. This is airing November 19th, the third Saturday. The quote we put up on all social media today is, "Nothing is a waste of time if you use the experience wisely." And I put up the thinker. Think about that. I mean, the thinker, everybody go, well, you're just sitting there, but like, here's this dude thinking, and he's deep in thought, and people are like, oh, he's just sitting, but it's true. And you even think about the experience Richard Serra had, maybe like now, it may be different for him too, because we can have our experience immediately. And then 10 years later, that experience will, because of other life lessons and things, that experience will change.
Yep.
Yep.
If you're lucky, it will change. If you've grown, it will change. Right.
See, this is fascinating. Okay, we did go down the rabbit hole. I'm sorry. But anyway,
well, listen, getting back to starving artists.
Go. I'm going to shut up now.
No, all your points are good. Well, we have to go forward into 20th century. That was really when starving artists started being used, to describe what was going back back with art in the 19th century, in the late 19th century, and in the early 20th century, because during the Jazz Age, you had all these people who had managed to hold on to some money. There was more money in America at that time. There was a better economy in France, a little bit better, because American Americans were going over there and buying these French Impressionist paintings. So, but this is leading up to World War I, and if you know anything about that era, the Jazz Age, there were people sensed that all was not well, and a lot of them, especially if they had any money at all, they would try to avoid facing the reality of another war by pretending that nothing was wrong, and they would partying became a big thing, alcohol became a big thing. Having fun was the highest thing you could do if you were in college. They were very different in their outlook than what was really going on that might affect them. So those were the people that would looked down. They were sort of snooty. They looked down on people who they saw as less themselves, and that that group. One of those groups was artists, and so they would call them, "Oh, the starving artists,"
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a very derogatory, not a sympathetic kind of thing to call somebody. Yeah. Now, I think that the interesting part of that is that the so-called starving artists didn't see themselves as starving at all. They had a lot of group support, and they sold paintings sometimes they didn't. But I think they prided themselves. They didn't want to cave in to corporate America, I guess, which really wasn't the problem at the time. But they didn't want to do what everybody thought they should do. They were very independent, and
that's cool that they stood up.
It is cool. I looked up several definitions of starving artist. I found one that I felt covered all the arts, not just visual. But one of these definitions, they're all basically the same, but one of the definitions of starving artist is an artist who sacrifices material well-being in order to focus on their work. No, and they did that a lot out of them. So the downside to that is they're out there creating their work. They're probably not going to be recognized in their lifetimes.
Right.
But I think they resign themselves to that. They're doing what's important to them, and we've used the word integrity, and I think that displayed it. Artists are going to look scruffy, even if they make a little money, because they're going to be covered in old clothes and paint. That's just what we wear for the most part. So the upside of that, I think, is that if they are truly that passionate about their work, it shows in their work, and hopefully in their lifetime they'll get recognized for it and they'll benefit monetarily from it. Sometimes their work won't be recognized till after they're dead.
Right. That's what's so sad. And then sometimes, sometimes people do things beforehand. And, I think like Loretta Lynn, she just passed away. Jack White looked at it, rock and roll Jack White looked at her and went, "Oh, we've got to do something. We've got to preserve this sound. We've got to do, And I think a lot of artists, I'm just talking on the music side, see like we've got to do something. Bonnie Raitt, with all the blues musicians that never got their due, stood up and went, "Hey, I'm learning from them, and they never got their money from these records." Record companies that, got all the profits. And you hear these stories all the time where the artists come together and band together. And I think that's an important thing. It's better than the communism thing we were talking about earlier.
Right.
We've had all these conversations, and I don't even know if it was on this show that we're talking about that, but I'm just saying, when you think about all, it is, a fight to stay independent and doing what you're supposed to do. Right. There's the whole thing about we're here on earth to do something, and maybe it's multiple things. Everybody's got a different path, and it's about respecting that. And how can we all help each other and do that as best as we can? And I think it's the same as being an independent magazine and independent radio and independent,
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about being independent and going,
Yes.
that's why I have a middle finger and I love it.
Hey,
But
that's how
sorry,
this,
but it's
that's how this
true.
country was founded,
Exactly.
by
It
people
is.
being independent.
The arts tell the truth, and sometimes we don't like the truth, but you're going to have to, swallow down a little bit. Maybe a few years later, you'll get it, but that's the truth. There's no, I mean, I do this quote of the day, like I talked about Rodin, and I do this, on our social media, and I don't know what's going on with Twitter, but whatever. And I do all that, but every time when I get to the artists and musicians, man, some of them are so blatant. I'm like, damn, like, should I put this up there? People are going to get mad. And then I go, let's just see what happens. And then you see people, it's really actually very interesting. Do we want to hear the truth? Do we want that? Or do the arts are our nurturers and our reality at the same time, and our fantasy. That's what's so fascinating about it. We need it as an escape, but we also need reality, but it does it through this escape loophole. It is the gray area. It is going over the line. It is sacrifice for those who go out, whether or not you like their art, that go out and actually go, I'm going to make it work, whether or not they have to have a job at the same time. I'm talking about all arts. There's an integrity to do what is in your soul. It's beautiful. And I think we should all support each other doing that, whether it's art or not. I mean, for some, it's being an accountant, and that you better be creative.
That's about,
otherwise we don't want to
books.
hire you. Just saying. So
I
just think this is a fascinating conversation that really leads to doing what you're supposed to do.
There's been a shift in the way, of course, starving artists accusing somebody of being, or a group of being, they're starving artists. That was meant as a real put down at the time it was originally said. I think that you're right, that people have come to understand that artists pouring out their souls, whether in paint or music or writing, is it is integrity, and I'm sure of that because even now in the last 20 or 30 years, I have been in areas of the country where artists are getting together, artists who don't have dealers are getting together, and they're having their own sales, just like the Salon de Refuses in a way, except they're calling them very proudly starving artist sales. So this whole thing, this whole derogatory comment or term is shifted to a term of pride in a way that and of course it's a marketing thing too, because they're saying this, oh yeah, we're starving artists. Well, they're not really starving.
Right.
they haven't sold a lot of work, but they're not starving. But they're calling themselves that, and they're trying to capitalize on a little bit of sympathy there.
Yes.
Yeah, they're putting their integrity on the line.
Yeah. Also, they're hoping that people will come and with the idea that maybe these starving artists don't really know what they're doing, but maybe I could find a really great piece of art
for a little bit of money,
bargain price. So
Yeah.
now it's a marketing tool. Now it's a marketing tool.
It's a marketing tool.
Well, that's a good thing, because we do need to support the arts.
Well,
And like I say to people, hey, listen, Bandcamp Fridays for musicians, it's the same thing. All the money goes to the musician on certain Fridays on bandcamp.com. So when you purchase your downloads, all the money goes. They just do that on that one day. And so you want that to happen. I think it's really cool that they do that. Otherwise, like really, everybody's at a different level of art.
Historically, artists, whether they be painting or musicians or writers, were known to be so engrossed in their art that they did not have a business brain. So somebody else had to step in and manage them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really where this all comes from.
Well, that's where
So,
the agent, and then, the
yeah.
gallery, that's why the gallery makes money, is they're like, we're doing the space, we're doing
Well, I
this.
know, like, some galleries, when I first started painting, going to galleries, and they were like, okay, they get 75%, you
It's
get
something like that.
25.
Yep.
And I was like, bye, see
For
you.
you. You know,
It's for
but
you. No,
but
really,
they're paying
because
the lights.
seriously,
It's their contacts.
I
They're
know
paying
that,
for the wine.
yeah,
They're doing.
but I was, able to sell without them. I just thought I would sell or make my career bigger by going to galleries. And in some cases, yes, it worked. In other cases, not so much. So, I mean, it's art, and I'm talking a long time ago when I first started out. But artistically, if a person has that in them, they're almost driven to, in some way, whether they call it a hobby or somebody else tells them, oh, it's your hobby or whatever, they're driven to create. And
Well,
I
Nancy,
don't,
I have to give a shout out to Nancy.
Absolutely.
Nancy has used her art. She enjoys painting, right? But
Mhm.
she used her art as a public voice for things that needed. She did it for cancer. She did it for wildlife situations, wildlife conservation. And so she found a different way. Yes, it promoted her, but it also she really was a voice more. It wasn't about getting rich, because we didn't, but we survived on it. We lived, we were comfortable, but she really used her voice. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because you will see sometimes people in not such a fortunate place actually give more sometimes to those kind of nonprofit needs or whatever. And it's not always about making a huge amount of money. It's about
No.
the artists want to survive, and artists don't always, everyone's different. I mean, you just can't. I mean, you look at Bev Doodle, who, Bev Doodle has this house, or had a house, that was like all carved with feathers, and I mean, it's crazy, but it's cool. So everybody's different about what they do with or without wealth. But I think it's interesting now too. I just got to go to this, that crowdfunding is kind of what you're talking about, the starving artists.
Mm.
When Nancy did her things, people were able to support an artist and her family, and also a nonprofit, which I think
Mhm.
was an amazing thing, and also have actual art
It's a-
in their household, in their life, and have like this whole other exchange, not just art. It was just this multiple layered thing. Nowadays, we're seeing crowdfunding happen for artists and musicians with whatever they're doing. It's like, oh, I've got a new album coming out. Oh, I have a new painting series, or maybe it's the theater. They're using crowdfunding. So isn't that kind of going to the starving artists in a way? Like, hey, I need everyone to come together to support me, and you're going to get this back in return. So isn't that part of where we're at now, Victoria?
There's a question in there. The coming together is really good. I think it gives people support. It gives a somewhat united front. It gives a way to promote when you pool your resources. So all that is good. Those people today that are doing that today might have been called starving artists in another era.
Mm-hmm.
If they could have done that. A lot of them, of course, we have so many more resources for promotion today that it may be easier to operate that way. I know that more and more people are selling their work online.
Mhm.
Not
Absolutely.
not through a dealer. So because the dealer does have an investment, and
Has the contacts.
he has his contacts. He's got a space. he's got electricity, and a roof that doesn't leak. So we sometimes need him, but and he deserves to be rewarded for what he does for us. but not. We have so many more artists today. There's not enough galleries to support all these artists. So going out on your own and doing your own promotion is a real viable alternative.
Mhm.
Exactly. I think it's
Especially
just
with
really
the
changed.
internet. Yeah.
Yeah, the internet has changed things, and like Instagram for photographers is a huge deal. It's huge. It's just amazing, and because you can connect with people in ways that you couldn't before, even though they have social media managers and everything, there's still a way to connect and do something to eventually get noticed. So we've really changed, and you could still be the starving artist, but go, hey, I've got a cell phone and social media. I can do this, you know? So yeah, I mean, it goes down to that word integrity, which we always come back to with you, Victoria. It's always awesome. So everyone, please go to Victoria's website, victoriachick.com, see her artwork and everything that's going on there. Is amazing work. Contemporary figurative art. First contemporary figurative artist I've ever met. I didn't even know the term until we met you. So, you've taught me so many more terms. Don't ask me to pronounce any of the French stuff that you did today. Good for you. You did that. But thank you so much. And everyone, Victoria's on our show every third Saturday. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. And when you go there, also go to blendradioandtv.com or nationalparktraveling.com. And you can hear her past interviews and read her articles there. So thank you so much, Victoria.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you. And I want to thank you especially because you sent me on these little
Rabbit holes.
tasks. And you always make me dig deeper than I ever would have dug otherwise. So you are improving my education.
Oh, thank you. You're improving ours all the time. Trust me. It's cool with these conversations, Thank you. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Okay. Talk to you later.